So this is a water-filled punching bag, and it's about the coolest thing I've ever touched in terms of learning some of the deeper punching technique stuff. So when you hit somebody, there's two things that are happening, and they're kind of like both happening, and one can happen more than the other, or vice versa. So when you hit, you're hitting basically two different fields. One field is the structure, so the bones, the tissues, the solid objects of the body. When you hit that, the energy goes into that field, and the structure gets like pushed or moved or warped as you put energy into it. The other thing that you're hitting is the water, right? And so the water, it absorbs energy like water absorbs energy, and so both of those things are happening simultaneously. And so when you hit, the structure, the structure work is what most people commonly focus on, and the water stuff is basically what people revert to as mind or psychology or other stuff like that, because the water is the mind. So all of your perceptions and everything is happening in the water, and the structure itself, the bones, the tissues, everything is also happening in the water. And so there's also a spectrum or a gradient between the structure and the water, because it's like you have bones, that's obviously structure in the water, muscle, obviously structure, fats, different structure, or is it dissolved? It's like proteins, DNA, increasingly fine molecules. Are those water? Is it fluid, or is it structure? And then you get all the way down to like the electricity, the electrons, the oxygen, and is that in the water? And so that you have this like sort of gradient, kind of a stepped gradient, but a gradient nonetheless between bones to water. And they're kind of two different things. The water is the thing containing all of the structure, and then the structure is really wrapped around, like it's the skin, it's wrapped around the water, and it's the core, and it's the center of the water, right? So the body and everything else is happening in mind. And like all of the metabolism, the perception, the structures, everything is happening in mind, is happening in the water, like the chemical reactions, your breath, the ATP cycling, all of the oxygen, electron transport chain, that's all happening in water. But then simultaneously, that water is all happening like inside the bag, inside the structure. And so you can be touching one or the other, and they're kind of the same thing, but it's definitely two different stuff. I can listen to the water in this bag, or I can kind of listen to the structure, the skin. So when you're hitting, the structure stuff is relatively straightforward, right? Like, oh, you hit here, the head falls forward, you push there, right? Or like, break it. Structure stuff is pretty intuitive. The water and like with the structure, it's also like very linear. Like, oh, the harder I hit it, the worse that's going to be for the structure. It's somewhat true with water, but with water, it's really similar to like, how do you make the biggest splash? How do you make the biggest cavitation? How do you make the biggest effect in water? And it's not just like hit with the stick as hard as possible. It's kind of, if you play with it and you see what makes the biggest like boom in water, you can you can figure out how to slap your hand down. If you slap it down in one way, it just like pops and it doesn't go very deep. You can hit water very hard and the water just accepts it. And the water just accepts it with no splash, with no boom, with no cavitation, right? And so it's like if you're doing Donate below for a tripod. Anyway, so you're like if you're going in and doing a jackknife, you can still jump from the same distance, have the same weight, and like some impacts you're going to make a giant splash, other impacts you're going to make no splash. So that is the technique of the water, is the technique of the consciousness, which is the other half of this like yin yang when you're hitting. So you're kind of trying to ring the water like a bell. How do you hit the water the hardest? It's whatever sends that like shock wave through the whole thing. And so that's just this trying to like pop it. It's not necessarily hard. You can only hit it so hard. And really the only thing that can hit it hard and hit it consciously is with the water of your body. So you can only hit as hard as water can hit, or as hard as water can push, and that's primarily the main motive. If you're even driving a normal traditional punch where you're going structure to structure, the structure is being pushed by the water. So for the other technique, you're hitting with the water, and so you're water in a bag. So by hitting the water and feeling the crack, you can very easily like copy that and just you can flow and crash from anywhere. And structurally it's not that crazy. Like if you're going to try and measure one of these punches, it's not going to read on the meter very much. But if you're moving from your water and you're trying to hit their water, and you just get these tiny little, it's just trying to make the biggest splash ever, and you can actually make a pretty big splash with the right flick of your wrist. So the right flick of all of the body water, which is the right flick of like all of your consciousness, that lands crazy hard, because even if you don't hit the structure very hard, it causes tremendous agitation in the fluid, which contains like all of the metabolism. It contains all this stuff, and that's considered a deep hit, is when you hit the water and you get this like, that's going to affect the person like a very deep hit. And so what happens is when you have somebody moving from their mind and their consciousness, they get it moving very hard and they basically hit deep, right? But if you're doing this on purpose, you kind of have this weird weapon, the same way that like a knife would let you hit deep, or a bat would let you hit deep. If you know how to use your awareness, your consciousness, which is your water, like once you know that your awareness is your water and so is theirs, you essentially have something that's as absurdly effective as a knife, to where a knife lets you be like, oh, I'm just going to go this hard, and then boom, that could be lethal, right? So a knife amplifies your striking ability 1,000-fold, right? Because it's just done, right? Same thing with like a bat or a whip. These things amplify your striking and your hitting ability by several orders of magnitude. So if you're using your consciousness, physically, that kind of seems like you're just throwing your water a little bit harder, right? Which is whatever. You throw water at a tree really hard, and it's not going to do very much. Throw water at a structure, it's not going to do very much. But if you want to influence their water, the thing that hits water the hardest is water. Hitting water with a bat doesn't hit it as hard, but if you want to slow down or influence or affect water the deepest, the quickest way, you're going to be wanting to do that with water. It has the greatest traction on it. Everything else kind of like slips through it, right? So if you hit with your water into their water, that that makes all of your stuff just 100,000 times more effective, just because of how badly it kind of damages the mind half of their body, right? Which is not separate from the physical half. It's a continuous spectrum between the water and the structure. But when you have this, if you target the structure in a very precise, pointy way, which, you know, a knife targets the structure in a very precise way, and so you can have your consciousness can target their consciousness in a very like precise way, and that's where you see a lot of the and so people think like, oh, once I can do this, then you should be able to win any fight whatsoever. It's not true, because when somebody's coming at you, even if they're only trained traditionally, their consciousness is hell bent on freaking breaking your face. And so that's a tremendous rush of chi or whatever. You can't, even if you like know how to attack with consciousness as a weapon, their, you know, a trained fighter's will and intent is already using consciousness as a weapon. It's just that absurdly aggressive thing. But you can kind of, if you hit like a heavy bag that's made out of stuff, you're practicing hitting into the matter field. But if you get one of these bags of water, it lets you like really feel what it's like to sink something deeply. And you don't have to like hit very hard. It's just like bloop, bloop, bloop. Or you can just like, basically you can practice, anything that you learn how to do to the water bag is like what you're doing to their mind. Because their mind's in the water. So it's just another tool. It's nothing, it's not like the ultimate, but on a good day, it's like half of it.